Okay, looks like we're live. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here on Serviceloop today. I do want to let everybody that's listening know that this is an interactive discussion. So if you have any questions for Juan, feel free to comment and we'll get to them as soon as possible. Juan, thank you so much for joining me here on Serviceloop. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Good
Um,
morning,
if
Kat. Thank you.
you if you want to go ahead and go ahead and tell us about your current role and your experience in field service.
Sure, though. Thank you, and my pleasure to be here. So, Juan Cruz Jr. Currently, I'm the director of service operations for North America for a company called Haemonetics. We are a blood management company. As part of my role, I oversee field service, phone support, project management, and product training.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, yes.
I always find leaders like yourself, you guys are always covering an array of things. It's never just one thing.
Yeah.
Given the topic, Juan, we're talking about the importance of leadership. How would you define leadership?
Yeah, so there's so many good definitions out there for leadership. I think one of my favorite definitions is from John Maxwell. I'm sure that pretty much everyone in the audience knows who John Maxwell is, and he says that leadership is influence. I would also add to that leadership is listening, right? I know that's a component of what leadership should be, but I think in an era where there's so much change going on,
Mhm.
people need to be heard. They need to be listened to. So I think that really listening to what's going on out there is critically important. Leadership in field service is more than just managing field service teams. I really think it's about inspiring and empower individuals to really excel their roles while fostering a culture of accountability, innovation.
Mhm.
And I'll kind of sit on accountability for a little bit because that's something that I really take to heart because I believe sometimes people think that accountability and being empathetic are kind of mutually exclusive, and they're not. You can hold people accountable and at the same time be empathetic. I
Right.
certainly want people to hold me accountable, right? So I think there has to be that mutual back and forth when it comes to that. Especially in field service, there's so many challenges with field service. A lot of expectations from just getting the issue fixed, right? Just get my device up and running. Make the customer happy, get the paperwork done, right?
Yeah.
And a leader in field service, it should possess a lot of different things, a lot of different traits, but some of them include strong interpersonal skills, strategic vision, and just
Mhm.
really the ability to navigate changes effectively.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love the accountability, especially on both parts. And like you said at the beginning, that comes with listening, right?
Yeah.
So a leader has to be open to listening to feedback, good or bad. It's about evolving as a team. And you touched on something. What are some common challenges that leaders face in field service, and how do they overcome them?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of different challenges, and I'm sure that all of us that are currently listening probably have either the same challenges or some very similar challenges.
Mhm.
I'll probably put in three buckets, right? So, I think the big one right now is managing remote teams. I know remote work kind of exploded after the pandemic or during the pandemic. Uh, if you've been in field service for a long time, it was probably nothing new to you, right? Because for the most part, field service teams have been remote, right? From my experience,
Yeah.
these days they probably just call it hybrid, right? Because you would start from home and then you would go out to either a customer site, whether it was at a hospital or lab, a
Mhm.
center. So I think that's still a challenge because for a lot of folks, it's new.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is because leaders can be you know in one part of the country, and their teams could be another part of the country, so the teams are just dispersed,
Hmm.
which makes communication pretty difficult. But those challenges can be overcome. It's either one, having regular check-ins with your field service group, whether it's weekly, or having making sure you have meetings with your team. So one of the things I used to do when I was a field service manager out in the field was just ride-alongs. Right, I would spend the
Yeah.
entire day with the engineer, the technician, and see how their day was going, day to day, and the customers they were visiting. I would learn things from the customer or from the employees, so I knew what was going on in the field. So it's really a combination of different things that you can do to just make sure that that remote team that you're managing, doesn't feel like they're out there on their own in an island.
Absolutely.
And a couple of other challenges, probably just adapting to rapid change. Customer needs, technology is shifting pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think leaders have to be, pretty agile, and they have to be able to encourage innovation and just continuous learning with their teams. And then the third thing I would say is just really balancing, customer needs with technician well-being.
Mm.
I've been in, companies where, it was 24/7, right? So, we had on call, and as soon as that technician got in the door at home at 5 o'clock, 5:30, hour later, they're just going right
Out
back out,
again.
right?
Yeah.
So, and then I've been in other organizations where the field service team, Monday to Friday, and there was much more of a work-life balance. But we have to be able to manage those stress levels with our technicians, regardless if it's 24/7 or 8 to 5. You just need to have careful planning, on-call schedule, rotation, and sometimes you have to make difficult trade-offs, right? Sometimes depending on the organization that you're in, that field service engineer might have to go out in the evening. They might have to work on the weekend, right? But you also have to make sure that you're resourced appropriately. I know that throwing resources at a problem is not always the solution, but as long as you have processes in place, systems in place, and adequate resources in place, I think that you can balance both the customer needs and the technician well-being.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%, especially the well-being of a technician as well as the customer service. I think a lot of times in field service, it's customer forward, right? But are we checking in on our technicians? What does their day-to-day look like? And I think as a leader in field service, like that should be you setting the tone. Going into that, how do you see true leadership evolving in field service, given, like you said, technology and how it's advancing, especially in field service as well? How do you see that shifting? How do you see leadership shifting from 5-10 years ago to the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's really about embracing technology. I think field service leaders have to be much more open to embracing technology. I mean, we have so much out there when it comes to artificial intelligence, augmented reality. So being able to embrace technology so that you are enhancing the ability of your team to be able to resolve customer issues pretty quickly
Mhm.
and also deliver on results. I think that's a big thing for leadership to embrace, and how things are evolving. A lot of times, it doesn't cease to amaze me how some companies are just lagging behind on that, while others are just light years ahead. And I think
Mhm.
that that gap has to be closed, especially if you want to stay competitive, not just as a company, but on the services that you're providing to, to your customers, and not just to your customers, but making sure that you're enabling your field service team, right? Because those are the folks who are going to deliver that good customer experience. You got to make sure they're enabled with that technology. So I think leaders just,
Yeah.
They have to really embrace technology, because the old way of doing things, that's,
It's
is
not as
almost in the
sufficient.
rear view mirror. Exactly. It's going to be in the rear view mirror. It already is, right? But it's going
Right.
to get to a point where you're no longer going to even see in the rear view mirror, because you have to look forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. With leadership evolving, and I agree, implementing AI, going back to the root of things, who has kind of professionally or personally been an example of true leadership in your life?
That's a great question, because one of the companies I work for, this individual, I consider him a mentor,
Hmm.
and he came in as a director, so I was reporting directly to him as a service manager. Shortly after, I want to say probably a year, 2 years into that director position that he came into, he was promoted to vice president. And I still keep in touch with him. As a matter of fact, we texted, we chatted for about
Hmm.
30, 45 minutes about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
And what I appreciate about this person, and I'm not sure if anyone knows him, he's out there on LinkedIn, but Robert Frieden. So if anyone knows him, they'll know that this is just a wonderful individual. And last time I talked to him, I said, Bob, just so you know, you're a mentor of mine. And obviously he didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily verbalize it that way.
Hmm.
But I just appreciated that he had a vision when it came to field service. Um, Field service typically is not seen as a professional organization in some
Right.
respects. Like, for example, human resources, they have SHRM, right? They have this professional organization that represents this particular group. Field service, not necessarily, right? Sure, there's programs out there that can kind of get certified in service management, but not to the level like SHRM and human resources. So I really appreciated that he really wanted to instill a sense of professionalism
Hmm.
in field service, and he really had a vision of how that was going to happen. So again, he's just a wonderful mentor of mine, and someone that I just keep in touch with on a regular basis.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that as well. I think I agree. Like, anytime I hear field service, any department, it's kind of like they're put on the back end, and it's crazy because you guys are at the forefront of customer service.
Yes.
So having somebody that kind of understands that or has that vision already, I think it helps other field service leaders be seen, be heard, and understand that direction. What advice would you give current leaders kind of wanting to make an impact on their team or wanting to shift the way things are going if things are not going so well for them or they feel their team's not on board or working as well together? What advice would you give those leaders that are trying to shift to better leadership?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned one of the key things at the beginning, and this is such an obvious one, but again, it's something that we have to be very intentional about. But one of the key things is just listen actively, right? I think we've heard all the quotes out there about about listening first to understand before being understood, right? So really taking the time to truly understand your team's challenges, the successes, more than anyone else, right? In field service, your engineers, your technicians,
Hmm.
they're out there in front of the customer, right? They know what's going on. They know what's going on with the product. They know what's going on with the customer and how their needs are changing. They're aware of the competition. There's just a wealth of information within their minds, within their heads,
Mhm.
And I think that as leaders, we have to listen actively and very attentively to our field service teams out there. The other thing I would say is, be transparent when sharing information, openly, honestly, because that's going to just foster trust. I'm the type of individual. If someone comes to me with a question
Mhm.
and I know the answer, but I can't give them the answer, I'll say, I know the answer, but unfortunately, I cannot tell you the answer, right?
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is if you do know the answer and they find out that you did know and you told them you didn't know, now that's going to create a level of mistrust, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
people are going to make their own stories in their head. So I'd rather say,
Yeah.
I do know the answer, but I can't tell you, as opposed to the opposite, being found out that I did know. And now,
It will be shared. Yeah.
you create that level of mistrust. So, I rather try to minimize that, creating their own ideas or thoughts or stories by just saying, hey, I know, but I can't tell you. That information is going to come out at a later time or after X period amount, then I can tell you. But it's just really about being honest so that you can foster that trust with your team.
Yes. Yeah. And I think those two things, listening and transparency across all boards, not just field service, I think in general, leaders should have those qualities. So, my last question,
And actually,
final.
I had one more thing. So
Go ahead.
I don't want to miss this one because I think this one is key too. Is never stop learning. I think again,
Yeah.
I love cliches because the one thing about cliches is that they're true, right?
Mhm.
So leadership is a journey, just like learning is a journey. I think we never arrive, right? We don't arrive to a position. We don't arrive on our learning, right? Just continuous growth and just seek out new perspectives. It's
Yeah.
that's one thing I do is, well, I do several things, right? So when it comes to continuous learning is I read a lot, right? Actually, right now I'm in the midst of reading two different books on leadership, two very great books. I'll take some LinkedIn courses or I'll listen to podcasts, but anything I can get my hands on, I like to, take as much knowledge and absorb as much as I can. And sometimes I'll, absorb some content that might not necessarily, you know, has anything directly to do with my position that I'm in, but you can always get this, one or two nuggets of truth or knowledge from something
Yeah.
completely unrelated and somehow you can acclimate it to, to your work. So,
Yes. And I think leadership is being the teacher and the student, right? So you're constantly learning, you're constantly implementing, but also teaching as you go along.
yeah.
So, last question, Juan. This is a fun one. If you could be any Marvel character, who would you be and why?
uh, well, I know you were specific about Marvel characters. I will answer Marvel
Why
character.
is
But
it a DC
yeah,
character?
yeah, but I do like the question Marvel character because
Okay.
I love Batman, but Batman's is brooding, dark individual. So, but for the purpose of your question, I mean, to me, it's Captain America, right?
Okay.
I think a few things that I like about him is that you know I've seen just about all the Marvel movies, right?
Mhm.
So he is so loyal to his friends. One, that's just huge, right? He's very loyal to his friends, but he's also kind of fighting for a greater cause that's kind of greater than himself, and
Yeah.
he knows his purpose, right? And that really drives him. And I'll kind of expand on that. When it comes to field service, as leaders, you have to give people a room or encourage them to really discover what their purpose is. Because a lot of times they don't realize what their purpose is, don't realize that this, medical device, what the impact is having on that patient. I remember vividly, an example of, one of my last meetings at my previous company where we actually brought in a patient who was the recipient of treatment through one of our devices. And the audience were the engineers, a group of engineers, myself, and one of the service managers that reported to him. And that just really brought it home for the engineers that, wow, there's someone at the end of this device. So
Yeah.
when I repaired this device, when I installed this device, when I maintained this device, would I be satisfied for my own family member to be tied to this device, right? Because that's how you have to think of it, right? Because you
Right.
never want to cause harm to a patient, so you always want to do your best to make sure that that medical device is running as best as possible.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I love Captain America. I think I didn't realize, but he is very loyal. So that definitely sticks out.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to announce Juan is currently open for new opportunities. So anybody that's listening, and if you have any roles open, Juan, are there any specific roles that you're looking to dive into for your next adventure?
Sure. So, I mean, I've been in, service, whether it's, professional service, field service operations for a long time. And obviously, especially in medical devices, and, even I had a stint in management and retail at one point. But, I'm sure I can add value somewhere in any of those forms, whether it's, field service operations, customer success, right? Because we're always touching the customer at some point in this position. So, so if anyone has a leadership position out there, please reach out to me through LinkedIn, or if you know someone else, please find me on LinkedIn, because I am open to other opportunities. And while you're in my LinkedIn profile, I'll just add one more thing, because we're talking about leadership today. But certainly, click on my link and I'll take you to a blog where I try to put out at least once a week a blog post on leadership on different topics. I like to create these leadership topics around an inspirational quote. So go out and visit that blog website and read some of the articles there.
Thank you, Juan. This has been such a great chat. I really enjoyed it. And I
Thank
want to
you.
say thank you for joining us here on Service Loop.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it. My pleasure.
Thank you.